It's important that we reinforce the actual purpose of HTML. And the purpose of HTML is to define the content in your page, or provide semantic meaning to your content. Currently, what we have in our page is headers and paragraphs, which is pretty good. It's pretty descriptive. I mean, when we look at these things, these are definitely headers or headlines or titles, however way you want to define them. And down here is the paragraph text that accompanies the title. But let's take a look at where we got our content from. This content comes from the Wikipedia entry for History of the World Wide Web. And what I want to do is just compare what we have versus the actual article. Looking here, you could see that, well, looking down this way, you could see that this everything underneath the headers that we define as H1s, we define all of these as H1s. But compared to the actual Wikipedia entry, we see that this big H1 is the title of the entire piece, and these other smaller guys are they're titles for the paragraphs that follow, but the paragraphs are within the larger document. So what does that mean? In essence, it means that these smaller headers don't actually have the same weight in our document as the big one, as the first one. And HTML actually has something to account for that. When you look at what we did, we defined everything as an H1. Now, you can not only define H1, but there's other values, H2, H3, H4, H5, and so on and so forth. Now, it's important that you don't get too carried away with these things, because you really got to think of their semantic value. If you just, well, let's actually test some things out first. So before we even go into what we could do with different headers, let's edit our document and look at how some of the default ways that headers are presented in HTML. If I'm just going to kind of copy and paste this title, and I am going to just go H2, 3, and 4 and show you what I mean. Now, well, I don't want to refresh. This is my live page, and I'm editing the local page. So let me just open the local version of my document. And now we see the impact of H1, 2, 3, and 4 over here. They kind of get smaller. So, when you're first new at doing this, the first thing you're thinking is, okay, I get it. So if I want the tags to be bigger, I'll name them H2, H1 to be the biggest. Then I can make them smaller, doing H2, 3, and 4. Well, that's not the approach you want to take, because in all honesty, we can make all of these tags be the same size anyway through CSS. So these are just how the browser by default renders them. So when you're choosing H2, H3, H4 tags, it's important that you choose them more for their semantic meaning within the text versus some kind of stylistic thing you may be thinking, because you have total control over it. So as far as I'm concerned, in our document, we don't have anything much than H1 tags and H2 tags. And really, in your if you look at any web page and you really kind of think hard about this concept of defining your headers by their weight in the document, you'll see that rarely do you have to go beyond a H3 tag. Or, I mean, if you look at something as busy as even Amazon, you'll start to see that you don't have to go that deep. So be careful with how you use these things, because later on I'll show you how we could actually edit them in all sorts of different ways. And I mean, you could have a page like Amazon that just has H1 and H2 and define all sorts of different looks for it. So with that in mind, the next step that I'm going to do is change all of my headers. Let me get rid of that. I'm going to change all of my headers with the exception of history of the World Wide Web from H1 to H2 tags. And then here's what I could do. Since I'm using this text wrangler, I could just do a find and I'll replace it with H2. I'll replace all. You got to be careful doing this. This is how you could like basically mess up your document really quickly. But I know it's going to change everything. Now let's see. I'll change the other one. I'll change /H1 to /H2. Replace all. Okay, 9 instances. If I save this, I'll give it a refresh. Okay, it changed all of them to it, which is sort of what I wanted with the exception of the first header. And let me see, and I could change that. Back. There we go. Now, depending on what code editing software you have, you should have something in there that has a find and replace function. I'm not even sure where it is in mine. I just use the shortcut key Command F to pull mine up. But if you don't feel comfortable doing it in bulk like that, just go ahead in your text and do it manually. Just change this would have been H1 and H1. Obviously, you just go back and change it to H2. It's HTML, so you know the syntax. And the result should be a page that has now a big H1 tag for its header and H2 tags for the rest of them. And of course, we may not want this to be that color and that style. So what I'm going to do is go into my HTML. I'm going to take this entire thing that I defined for H1, bring it down, and then just change it to H2. And I'll give my browser a refresh. Okay, very good. Now it looks like the rest of it. And now just to define a different color for my H1, instead of having it gray like I had, I could make that black and give it a reset, or a refresh, and there we go.